Well, blessed Wednesday to you as we come to you with your daily encouragement. And he's been Dietrich Bonhoeffer has been talking about rising early, rising unto the Lord. Been reflecting upon when we rise early, it is an imitation of our own resurrection, even if it is just another day in this life. And so now he gives some practical advice on what this rising looks like, what this devotion can look like. Common devotions, he says in the middle of 44, should include scripture reading, song, and prayer. Different fellowships will require different forms of worship, and this is as it should be. A family with children needs a different devotion from that of a fellowship of ministers, and it is by no means wholesome for one to be like another, or for a company of theologians to be content with the family devotion for children. But every common devotion should include the word of Scripture, hymns of the church, and the prayer of the fellowship. We speak here of these elements of our common devotion. And he will proceed on that, but I need to just stop right there. I think that is so important. One of the things that I remembered from when I was starting to learn about the things of God and the things of the church was a hymnal. That was the thing that usually appeared when I went to church. And my mom had a copy of what we called the Old Red Book that later became the Green Book. Now my kids will know it as the Old Green Book, and we're back to the Red Book, or Cranberry Book, I think we've liked to call it. Whatever color it is, inside of it was always some amazing things that I never fully understand. I remember even asking my mother sometimes. And she was never a person who went to a seminary or college of the church, and a lot of things are in Latin. There's a lot of things that were kind of a mystery to me. And one of those things was what we call the order for morning or evening prayer. And I often wondered about how complex they looked. I often wondered why the Latin, why all these strange names for things coming up. And I've grown and learned to appreciate those things, having had the opportunity to go to college and to seminary and to be knowledgeable about those things. But then it comes to the time where you have to relate to others who maybe are not oriented that way, and specifically children. And with my family, I don't come and just tone down. In fact, Emily has joked that she had made sure that I didn't teach our kids Greek or Latin or Hebrew because it was just kind of a way to show off to other people. One of the things we did learn, or I needed to learn, was to get back to just simple devotions again. Not to say that there wasn't anything wrong with the complexities and the mysteries that I had learned in other forms. I needed to find once again the mystery of God in the simple, in the what I would have considered just pedestrian, but really what it is the cry of the childlike heart. And that's what Jesus calls us to in prayer in many ways, is a cry to a childlike heart. And I've found great solace in a lot of the more complexities, yes, and I sometimes have had the opportunity to pray some of those more intricate styles of prayer. I said earlier that I belong to a society of pastors. We call ourselves the Society of the Holy Trinity, and when we gather in fellowship, we have 48 hours together in which we do some of the prayers that would be in many other settings too complex and would be very distracting to people, and maybe not something that they would find freeing, something that would be too much of a burden. But together in that theologian class, we can worship that way. But we also have the freedom when we're with our kids, when we're with our parishioners, when we're in any other setting to worship. But there's a flexibility because it is a God who meets us in every time and place. It's the same God who meets the theologians as the same God who meets the preschool family, the same God who meets the parishioners in whatever farm or place we find ourselves. It's the same God whether we worship in a very informal, charismatic style, or whether we worship in a much more formal, liturgical style. It's the same God who meets us in all those places because Christ has decided to fill in all. And it is the same as if we were going and looking at a garden and we'd see the rich diversity of colors and sizes and different styles of plants. Each one has its distinct characteristic, its distinct way of being, but together they show the great vibrancy that God has created us individually. God has created us in different communities. God has created us for life. And so we are to celebrate that life. But he gives us here a little structure. It should include scripture, it should include some of the hymns of the church, and it should consume prayer. Those are the things that God calls us to. And as long as those are in place, we have a glorious, glorious future. God bless you today. We trust that these are words of encouragement to you today. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.